What's going on, guys? Today I'm going to show you how to use the React hook useContext. This is a hook that's good to use when you find yourself sending props down through multiple nested child components. useContext lets you define a property and a parent component, and then instead of sending it through all of those nested components, you can go to the component you need it and then bring it in there. So this app here, I have the layout as my parent component where I need this user variable, and then that has a profile component inside of that, which then has a greeting component inside of that, and then inside the greeting component we want to display the user. I just have a placeholder there. So normally you would have to say user equals user, and then you would have to do user equals props.user, and then you'd have to go to greeting and you would say props.user. And there could be a bunch of components they have to send it through, which could be cumbersome. So we're going to use the useContext hook to avoid that. And then last thing I want to show you about this app is I have two states here, the user and a login. I have two let variables, render user and login form, and then a ternary expression where I see if there's a user, and if that's true, I make that render user variable equal this, displays the user and says, that username's app. And then that has the profile and all those nested components. And then if this is false, if there's no user, then we have a login form where as they're typing in the input, it's setting the login to whatever they're typing. And then when they click login, it's setting the user to whatever they typed in that login. So that's when it sets the user to login. And then lastly, I have render user and login form down here, and it will render whichever one is defined. And I'll just show you the app here. Shred Flintstone is the user, and then the profile component, and then the greeting component where we want to also display Shred Flintstone. And so that's the application and where we're at. If I refresh this, the user goes away, and we have that login form. So to send that user to the greeting, we're going to use context. And to do that, we're going to create a new file, and we'll call that context.js. And we'll import create context from React. And then we'll call this context user context. And we'll actually export this so we can use it anywhere in our application. And you could have multiple different contexts. You could have like a theme context. You could have a toggle sidebar context, which you could, send a Boolean on if the sidebar is open or closed, to any component in your application. Now, in the layout component, we want to bring in that user context. So we'll import, and this will be a named import because we didn't do export default, user context. We exported multiple contexts, and we want to grab the user context from our context file. And now we create a provider that wraps around our component. So we'll say user context dot provider. We'll bring that all in here. And now any of the child components inside this wrapper can access this context. And you could wrap this around your entire application if you want. And it gets a value, which we send in the property that we want to use anywhere in the child components. And for us, that's going to be this user. And now we can bypass this profile component and go straight to the greeting component and use that context in here. And to do that, we'll say use context. And then this const is going to be the value that we get from this provider, which will be the user. So I'm calling it user. And then we send in the context that we want to use, because we can use multiple contexts. And so we'll bring in our user context. From our context file, and then we will put that in here. And now, instead of that placeholder, we will put the user. And so now if we save that, let me go back to our component, shred Flanders, log in. We have it here and here, and we bypassed the profile component. Now, another cool thing you can do is we're sending in the user. You can also send in the set user to change it. You can do user and set user. And then in the greeting, we'll bring it in here as well. And let's say we have a button, and when we click it, we will set the user to shred Flintstone. We'll call that button change user. So if we save that, we have this change user button, and it'll say shred Flintstone on both of these, which is useful. If we were to change our theme in one place, it would change the theme in the other place. Or the Boolean to open or close the sidebar, it would keep, all of those properties in sync with each other. And that's all for today, and thank you for watching.